Welcome to week 2 of Blocktober. This week I'm going to be focusing entirely on structures as opposed to the organics I did last week. For this farmhouse build, I started with the rough shape and palette before using World Edit to rotate it. Afterwards, I added a roof gradient and filled in all the gaps. I then terraformed the hill beneath it and changed the biome to a savanna to add a yellowish tint. Next, I added the apple trees and baskets, as well as a wooden water tower to the right. Finally, I detailed the walls with windows and a subtle gradient. Over here is the farmhouse. To the left of it is the orchard with some apples ready to be harvested. Some of them have been already, such as the ones in the barrels down here. Round here as well, there's the larger water tower, there's the chimney and the vines, just to add more detail. And then indoors there are interiors such as this living room and the kitchen, as well as others. Around the back there's this oak tree here, the larger custom one, as well as a pumpkin patch around the back. Day 5's build came in as a suggestion from Slyosaurus in my Discord server. They asked me to build something in relation to the German festival Oktoberfest, so I chose to build the Munich beer halls. This time I only did the facades of these buildings so as to create more of a town square feeling. Therefore, I wanted to focus more on detailing the walls with decorations rather than texturing them. I mostly used white terracotta, granite, dripstone and jungle planks, which helps give the build a warm tungsten feel. Finally, the beer kegs, yellow bunting and cafe tables helps make it feel a little more lively. The open spaces and tall buildings makes for a super nice town centre feeling, then the warm tungsten colours creates an autumnal vibe, and finally the bunting, the parasols, the beer kegs and all of these decorations makes for a super nice diorama by bringing all of these things together. I chose to take a futuristic route for day 7 and came up with a Cyberpunk City. I began by mapping out the rough layouts with 3 buildings and 2 futuristic looking roads. I then went in and started adding the smaller details, power generators, neon advertisements, and this holographic image of an autumn tree over it all. The finishing touches were just adding in textures, small details like pipes and bins, and a bit of greenery underneath the main road. This one's my personal favourite as there's just so much to unpack. At the top there's this hologram of an autumnal tree, there's more details on top of the buildings like a crane and some solar panels. As you go down there's more windows, advertisements, billboards, things like that. And as you get right to the bottom, there's almost this slums area, this poorer part of the city. There's this darker road running through the middle. There are these electrical generators and things like that, this crate and this scaffolding. But then underneath the road running over the city, there's just this little patch of greenery and this autumnal tree out of nowhere. Day 7 was a little more laid back, as I chose to build a small little Hobbit Village. I planned out the main path out of concrete which meanders up a hill, then filled in the gaps with houses and gardens using gold and diamond blocks. After that, I just went in one by one, slowly texturing and detailing all of the houses. The acacia and the pumpkin patches scattered around the build adds that perfect pop of orange, and the autumnal tree on top of one of the houses brings the whole thing together. Despite this being one of the smaller builds, there's still so much to unpack from it. From a distance you can see so many little things tucked away in tiny little corners, and there's so many different pops of colour. There's the yellow sunflowers, the blue orchids, and the orange doors and pumpkin patches. And walking up on it you really get a sense of all the details, and it gives off such a cozy and friendly vibe. I really like the pumpkin patches and flower beds, and also this pumpkin cart in particular. They just make use of small little details really nicely and make this build come together. Day 8 is a cozy cabin hidden deep inside a tiger biome. The build itself was fairly simple. I planned out the shape with full blocks before going in and smoothing it out with slabs and stairs. I then started shading the roof and texturing the walls to create a rustic, simple feeling. Finally, I added extra details around the window and the balcony before moving on to the terrain. I made the terrain out of coarse dirt by hand and carved a dirt path into it, then used world edit brushes to paint in the different textures. Then I finished off by building a few custom trees to wrap up the forest feel. I think the cabin turned out quite nice. I do like the textures and the details using the debug stick, and I like the shading on the roof and the little patches of moss and things like that. It just creates a nice overgrown rustic feel and it works really well. In particular though, I do like the texturing and painting on the floor. I like how I've blended in the podzol with the coarse dirt using the brown concrete powder, the jungle logs, things like that. And I also like the custom trees. I used the grass to create a bushy feel and the mushrooms to sort of act like pine cones, which works really well. As you can see here, for day 9, I accidentally started my replay recording a bit late. I prepared the composition of the build with rough shapes made of concrete, which allowed me to separate the Gothic Church into different segments. The gradient for the church walls was my favourite part of the process. I used so many obscure blocks such as bedrock and coal ore to create a dark to light gradient. I also added a gradient for the roof from the dark prismarine to the oxidized copper blocks, which unintentionally created a nice weathered effect, which is a pleasant side effect of this technique. The finishing touches were the gravestones and the mausoleum in the graveyard, which came together to create a really nice, spooky, haunted vibe. This one is your classic Scooby-Doo style haunted graveyard. The graveyard over here has cool little details with the different gravestones and flowers, and the mausoleum over here, which is really nice. And I also like the corrugated iron bars and things around it, and the nice gate over here, as well as the soul sand path going through the center. And the church itself is a really nice Gothic church with a gradient from black over here all the way to the light andesite up there. And I also like the roof over here with a really nice weathered effect. And to end off week 2, I went for a simple medieval manor. I started off by building it outside of the plot so I could paste it in when I was ready. The grey foundation, white walls, orange roof and deep slate trim helped segment the build and make each section stand out. I'm very fond of the gradient. The red sandstone to pumpkin to honeycomb combination is one that I've always enjoyed using. After pasting it onto the plot, I added a river embankment to one side of the house with a water dam and a water wheel connected to the building. Then on the other side, I finished off the grassy terrain going up to the river and built some more custom trees to complete it. This was a pretty nice finish for week 2 of Blocktober. I do like the use of texturing in this, how the iron ore transitions from the dead coral into the whiteness of the wall here, and then the end stone transitions into the orange of the roof, and then the hints of warped wood and mossy cobblestone and things like that in the roof to add like a weathered effect. Then around the side over here, there's the completely drained river with the water dam over here with the little holes in the wall using the debug stick and the really nice dark oak water wheel around here. And then you've got the staircase up into the rocky area here, which works really nicely, just connecting this whole build together. And once again, we have the mushrooms and the grass in the trees as bushiness and the pine cones. And there we are, 2 weeks into Blocktober. 10 builds in. Let me know which ones have been your favorite and if you have any suggestions for the upcoming builds. Anyway, I will see you all next time. Bye for now.